take advantage of tools like Slack and Trello, the Google Suite. I mean, just basically everything that we talked about in this podcast, because it will just make your business that much more of a well-oiled machine, as opposed to, just mayhem and miscommunications and things like that. So that would be my recommendation, is if you're not using organization tools today, think about how you can implement them and give them a try. I mean, I think that they'll change the way that you do business for sure.
Hey guys, welcome to the ZonCom podcast. This is your host, Andrew Erickson, and I'm very excited to have my business partner on here, Mike Jae. I like to tell people he is my business spouse because he knows more about my life and finance. He knows probably about as much about my life and finances as my actual wife does. So I call him my business spouse. Hey Mike, how's it going?
I'm doing excellent. So excited to be here and chatting with you on this podcast. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for spending your Friday afternoon doing this. So some long-term listeners might know Mike from our interview with Jae Jun on Guerrilla ROI. That was podcast number 19 or 20. That's a good one, and we use that Guerrilla ROI software all the time. But Mike is here today to talk about how we organize our team and kind of how we structure stuff. It's been kind of interesting learning how to do this, and definitely learning through trial and error as opposed to like doing it right the first time, the first way. So Mike, do you want to tell us kind of how we got started? Maybe just give us a little origin story of Mike, and then we can maybe jump into how we've been organizing the team.
Yeah, so met you through our mutual friend Anthony. He'd been telling me so much about you for as long as I can remember, saying, hey, you guys are like the same person. You guys really need to meet each other. I know you guys will hit it off and all that stuff. Basically, foreseeing our business spouse relationship before we even met each other. And I feel like that's exactly what happened. I still remember, the first day that I met you, and it really does sound like a business spouse relationship. It's
there's fireworks in the air, and our eyes turning like big hearts and stuff as when we first saw each other.
Just nerding out about just engineering stuff and just entrepreneurship. And I recall that you were already doing some business work in the Amazon world, and I was definitely interested in that. And from what I can recall, at least, I went home thinking about it and pretty much just hit you up the next day and said, hey, I want in. I want to know how this whole thing works. And we kind of went from there. Initially, you were kind of my mentor in this world. And then I think pretty soon after that, we realized that we were a good fit in terms of partners. And, it's just I don't know.
Yeah, I had been doing Amazon for about a year. Of course, just all part-time on the side kind of thing at that point. And I remember telling everyone about it. I was like, oh my God, this FBA thing, it's so fun. You can just make products and buy shit in China, and then all the factory workers do all the hard work putting it together, and then Amazon does the other hard work of actually shipping it out to the people, and you just orchestrate it, right? And I told everyone about it, and I told literally hundreds of people. And Mike, you were you seem to be the most excited about it. And the thing that really impressed me is you came back I don't know, a few weeks later, and you're like, oh my God, I read this entire, everything about the whole system. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Mike's smart and does research and stuff.
And I think we have to tell the story about the fact that way early on when we first partnered up, I kept saying, if I make even $1 off of this at all, I'll be thrilled. And even to this day, you're still giving me a hard time about that, saying, hey, why don't you just take your $1 and you'll be happy, right? And
yeah, I can just buy you out for $1. $1. You know what? Tell you what, I'll give you $2.
Ooh, that's 100%. That's a pretty good deal in most places.
Yeah, but it's been fun. I did have a separate brand that I was doing before Mike came on, and Mike came on. We just kind of partnered on one brand, and that brand ended up taking off. And my first brand still is in existence, but still doing decent. But our second brand ended up doing much, much better. And I think it's just a testament to the amount of work and dedication that Mike puts into it. So it's just by looking at the proof, they say proof is in the pudding. The brand that Mike works on does better than everything else I do. That's why I'm always like, well, whatever Mike gets involved with, it seems to do well. So let me just keep Mike around.
I can say that we definitely wouldn't be where we are today without everything that you do as well. I mean, we always joke about in this business relationship, it's you're always pushing us forward. I'm always just dragging our tail in, making sure that making sure to keep us out of trouble and things like that. So I think it's a good fit, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we started both part-time, just really kind of cramming in hours after work and maybe even after family goes to sleep and stuff like that, and waking up early or staying up late and like reading a bunch of forums and then like answering emails from people in China and all these kind of like, in those corner hours that you have sometimes that build the business. So it really started out where, I'm doing 15, 20 hours and Mike's doing 15, 20 hours kind of, like I said, crammed in on Sunday evenings and after 9 p.m., after family goes to sleep and stuff like that. So we started out like that. And now we're at a point where I'm full-time, Mike is half-time, and we have 3 or 4 other team members who are a combination of full-time and part-time. And I just want to talk about like how we organize our team and the tools we use and that kind of stuff. And this is a little boring topic, so hopefully we can like make it fun and exciting and sexy. But when I describe people our techniques, I always get like really flabbergasted of how we do this thing that we do. And so I thought like, well, maybe we should tell like everyone about it. It's pretty simple stuff. It's nothing like revolutionary, but the way we put it together, I think is pretty decent. And so, Mike, do you want to tell us, like, describe a little bit more about like what our team looks like right now?
Well, it seems like, obviously both you and I have our hands in a little bit of everything. But we have a few VAs that take care of a lot of our day-to-day stuff. And, that's where communication really is key. I know that when we first started out, it was pretty easy communication wise, because it was just basically you and me talking to each other. It was, text messaging at first. We were kind of intermingling like our business discussions with, pictures from the previous weekend's party. And so that started getting confusing because, you're scrolling through your text message trying to find something business related. And you're scrolling through pictures of, who knows what, like us at a barbecue or something like that. And from what I recall, I think we, at some point we said, hey, let's use Facebook Messenger for all the business stuff. And so that was a slight improvement because we just kept everything there. But I think when we started,
I remember saying like, hey, do you mind doing this? Or you'd asked me to do something. I'm like, hey, yeah, sure. And then like I would look 5 days later and I had to scroll through 72 messages about silly things, and then just to find that one question you asked, so yeah. It was tricky having just like Facebook Messenger as our communication.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. And I think it was really when we started bringing on people into our team that kind of forced us into using a different platform, where it kind of forced us to be organized in the sense that we needed to be able to still communicate with each other, but also communicate clearly to our staff as well. And I think that's I think it was your original proposal to try out this tool called Slack, and we've been using it since then, and I can't imagine doing it any other way at this point.
So I love Messenger. I love text messaging. I hate email. I still don't really do email. And I know that's one thing. Mike actually answers all the emails for us. And like, I'm so happy. Oh, well, the customer service is done by the VA. So Mike does all like the supplier stuff via email. I'm so happy. I hate email so much. And I know that like talking about like how to communicate is like a boring topic, but that's like how awesome Slack is that it's like, you can just, it makes communications so much easier and so much more organized. You can set up Slack channels where you just talk about, for example, just freight. Only freight and shipping is all done in one single chat window, or they call it a channel. And then planning is done in a different one, and social media is done in a third one, and the random stuff is done in a fourth channel. And it makes it, so I don't know if anybody's into forums, like chat forums, it's organized kind of like that. And it makes communication so much easier and faster and organized. And also there's like fun things where you can just do, like, you can insert GIFs into while you're talking, and like, oh man, I love that so much.
That's clearly the main reason why we switched over to it. Yeah, on the channels thing, at first I was kind of worried, because I was like, oh man, we're just going to end up creating channels for everything. And you know what? We ended up creating channels for everything, but I think that's the perfect way to do it. I think we have maybe like 24 channels at this point, and it's so great in that, when you're trying to look for information on something that was previously discussed, you just think, oh, what was the topic? Was it procurement? Was it marketing? Was it bookkeeping? And you just hop in that channel and you can just easily find exactly what you're looking for, as opposed to having, all the conversations in one place. It'd be so hard. So I think the channels really provide a really, really good way of categorizing those conversations based on topic.
You can also invite people into different channels and exclude them from other certain channels. So for example, our bookkeeper is inside of our bookkeeping channel. However, he is not inside of our social media, because he doesn't care about social media. We don't want him to get bogged down with those kind of emails or those kind of messages. And people who do our social media are in our social media channel and not in our bookkeeping channel. And so it kind of keeps people separated too. We generally try not to discuss any big numbers with our VAs, just to be
sensitive, or
we generally try to not to discuss big numbers with our employees. Like, we're investing this much in our PO, our purchase order, just because we want to be sensitive about money issues with our employees. And so we exclude them from our bookkeeping and finances and taxes and stuff like that. But of course we include them with stuff like freight and social media and stuff like that. So that's how we communicate. We started using Zoom recently. What do you think about Zoom?
I think it's nice. I mean, it seems like we kind of were hopping back and forth. I think we started video chatting initially on Skype, and then we switched over to FaceTime at some point. I haven't been an iPhone user for all that long, so I think we might have switched over once I got an iPhone. But I like Zoom though. I feel like the quality is just constantly, it's always good. There's never question of whether or not we're gonna drop for some unknown reason or anything. I don't think we've ever just randomly dropped a Zoom call before. So yeah, that seems like a great video chat tool.
Yeah. So the pro account for Zoom, I think, is like $15 a month, and it lets you use it unlimited. If you have the free account, you have all the same features, but they will drop your call every 40 minutes. And so it's still useful. You can just call back in, or you could just pay the pro account for $15. But it's great because you can record everything. This meeting right here actually is being recorded on Zoom. So we just grab the audio from this and turn it into the podcast. Also, when we use Zoom, you can do a screen share. So you can just let me show you my screen. And it's so nice to kind of be on the same page. When you're virtual, it's hard to show stuff, and we can do it via Zoom.
Yeah, I think the screen sharing thing is probably the biggest benefit that I feel like we've gotten since switching to Zoom from the other video chat services. Definitely being on the same page while we're actively discussing something makes it a lot easier when we can both see the same thing.
Yep. And another thing I wanted to talk about is sharing files. You want to tell us a little bit about how we do our file sharing?
Let's see. Where exactly do we share files? I mean, we're constantly sharing files. We're constantly creating new files, and so I feel like we have kind of our living documents and then more of our archive. And so on the living document side, we take advantage of the Google suite of products, so Google Sheets, Google Docs, that line of products. And then on the archive side, I feel like that's where we keep most of our Dropbox stuff. Our photographers, or our photographs from our photographers, and our purchase orders from our suppliers, invoices from freight forwarders, things like that all get stored there. I love the Google suite of products. I know both you and I are huge fans of automation, and just having the Google scripts built into that Google line of products where you can automate things in those documents, I think is one of the biggest pluses for us using those tools. What do you think?
Yeah, and I used to use Excel for everything. I just was always a big fan of Excel, and Excel is a little bit more powerful than Google Sheets, but considering Excel is almost nearly impossible to share at the same time, especially if you're both opening the same file. We ended up going over to Google Sheets kind of like by necessity. And now that I've fully adapted and accepted Google Sheets, I'm like, oh, I love Google Sheets. The only issue with Google Sheets, and this is like, because I'm a nerd, I care about this. If you have more than 10,000 lines of data, which you're always like, oh, that's a lot. I'm like, but is it? But is it? I don't know. So you have more than 10,000 lines, Google Sheets starts to choke. Where do I see that? Transaction files. Those are over 10,000. And also advertising is also over 10,000. So you basically can't do that in Google Sheets. But everything else is great. Everything else we can do in Google Sheets, and I love it, love it, love it. In Dropbox, we use Dropbox, and we have a team account, and it's a little bit on the more expensive side in terms of tools. It's $120 per team member per year, and that gives us 1 or 2 terabytes that we can share. And unfortunately, there's not a plan less than that. You get 1 terabyte or nothing. There's no like 10. I guess there's a free account for like 5 gigs or something like that, but like 1 video file can fill that up, right? So we ended up paying 120 times 5 or 6 people who have the account. So it ends up being, a couple $100 for a team. So it's not too expensive, but it's not cheap. It's not free, I should say. So we started trying to get more organized with our processes. And I set up a wiki. How do you like the wiki so far?
I love it. I love every bit of it.
Awesome.
I mean, to me, the wiki was so. I used to, as far as like trying to find reference documents and stuff like that. I can't tell you how much time I used to waste just like digging through our Dropbox or like digging through our Google Suite of stuff for specifically for reference documents. This is not documents that I'm trying to edit, but I either forgot how to do something or I needed to look up a specific number for something. And that's really, in my mind, what the wiki is for. It's it's for those standard operating procedures, for storing all of our reference information that doesn't really change on a day to day, and just being able to go to one place, open up one site, and just have a nice categorized layout by topic. Again, that categorization by topic is a lifesaver. Need to find out something about bookkeeping, open up the wiki, click the bookkeeping drop down, and just look for exactly what I'm looking for, and it pops right up. I think it's a huge time savings for sure.
Good. Yeah, I'm happy because I ended up, I read a book called E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, and it's an awesome book. Everyone should read that thing. It talks about building SOPs, standard operating procedures, like a tutorial or a recipe on how to do a certain task. And so I started archiving those in a wiki, and we were actually using Google Sites. It's also part of the Google Suite. It's free, and it's really easy to edit and set up and everything. And it is very useful, like Mike said, to just have like that archive of like how to do things. And there's so many times where I write the SOP, like I figure out how to do it. I write the SOP and I totally forget like how to do it. I'm like, oh, I can't remember. How do I like, wait, where do I go to change, like to make a disposal, like to throw away inventory? I can't remember. Like I'll look it up in the wiki and there's the article that I wrote, And the one thing that's really useful too is that when we are organizing our team and communicating with our team, especially like tasks and stuff, to show these people who live in the Philippines or live somewhere else in the world how to do something, what I'll do is take a screen capture video of how I'm doing it, and I'll narrate as I'm doing it. And then I'll upload that and give it to the virtual assistant, and she will actually type out an SOP based on my 5 or 10 minute video tutorial. And that way we have the video and we also have a written copy. And we do that both for like, because it just keeps us nice and organized. A lot of times if you're wanting to figure out like, what's the 4th step on an 8-step process, I can't remember. You don't want to watch a 12-minute video to figure that out. So you can just see like the 1, 2, 3, 4 steps that you need to do. And then the other reason why I love having the VA write the SOPs is because I make sure that she understands the task. Because if I can review her tutorial that she wrote and it's correct, I know she's at least understood the task well enough to create a tutorial, right? So that's the wiki.
Yeah, you mentioned that the wiki it's built on Google Sites and that it's integrated as part of that Google Suite. That's another part that I love about the fact that it's integrated with that whole ecosystem, because we're constantly creating Google Docs and Google Sheets nonstop. It's just like it's essentially a giant stack of digital papers that are just not in any way, really sorted or organized. But through the wiki, because it's part of that ecosystem, you can easily integrate them into the site and just basically pull them into the site. So you can reference, from a page, you can reference a particular Google sheet that you created. And that really helps to organize all those documents that we create on the Google Sheets and Google Docs side. It helps us to kind of create a front end for organizing all that through the wiki. I think that's a huge part of it. Is really, it's kind of for the same way that Slack organizes all our conversations by topic, the wiki organizes all of our working files, by topic as well.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I heard this concept where they say every time you triple in size, everything breaks. And I think that's a good example with us. Like when we were just doing 2 or 3 products, we're able to just text message each other back and forth. When it's just 2 people working part-time, you can just text message back and forth. But once you start adding in a full-timer or 2 more half-timers and you double or triple in size, that process breaks. And it's not just employees. It might be revenue or number of products or number of employees or number of hours worked, whatever it is, those processes will break once you triple. And every little part breaks too. So like once you start having, if you have 100 files, 100, let's say photos, you can just put them all in one folder, right? But if you get up to like 500 photos, you need to start that system of just putting it all in one folder stops working, right? You got to organize a little bit better. So that's one thing I've always kind of kept in mind is every time we triple in size, that thing should break, right? So I accept when things kind of work and then they break. I'm super cool with that. And now the one I think is most important, task tracking. You set up task tracking. You started task tracking for us. You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, so we use a tool called a Trello board, and it's something that I dabbled in before, but never really looked at too closely. But our task tracking used to be, as far as I can recall, was just kind of text messaging. Hey, what needs to be done? And it's funny that you exactly what you mentioned when we were much smaller. That actually was sufficient. It was okay. All right, here's a list of 5 or 6 things that need to be done. But obviously, as we continue growing, both in size of our business as well as adding in team members, we needed a much better way of tracking our tasking, and that's really where the Trello board comes in. With it's basically a more complex to-do list, but it removes complexity from tasking in the sense that you can assign people to a task and write details about the task. Kind of define what is considered done for that task, put due dates on them, prioritize them, label them accordingly. It's again going back to the whole organization and categorization piece. I think that this has kind of changed the way that we do business. I know you and I have our weekly Trello trims, as we call them. If you want to talk about that for a little bit,
Yeah, so like Mike said, we just would text each other like, yeah, can you do this? Yeah, sure. Did you do it? Oh, yeah, I did, but I forgot to tell you. Oh, shoot, I also did it. Oh, no, okay, well, we doubled our efforts on this. Well, I guess we both made sure it was done, but man, it was not good. And so, like Mike said, he set up this Trello board. Trello is Trello. And we started using this and assigning people, and it was a little bit of a learning curve to kind of get it to work well. But now the way we do it, I should maybe do like a video on like how we actually go about doing our task tracking. Right now, the way we do it is every single task is tracked always. Even tasks that you've already done, I will sometimes just make a Trello task just so I can confirm, just so I can document that it's been done. It sounds kind of weird, like documenting everything, but again, when there's 4, 5, 6, 7 people kind of coming in and out, and they're doing this and doing that, and like you kind of forget who's there and who's not there. Also, we're all virtual, and we're all kind of like time independent. So if something gets done at 1 a.m. in the Philippines, I don't know about it. I'm not in the same office as that person, right? And Mike might, even though him and I are in the same country, I might work till 9 p.m. and Mike starts working at 5 a.m. my time, right? So you don't really know what other people are doing. And so we create those tasks to track what everyone's doing. And we have a rule for our Trello cards. The rule is one person owns it. And when that person's done, if they need if they need help from someone else, they change that responsibility from them to the person who needs to help them, right? So it's always one person on a card. We always have a due date. The card itself should be enough information to know how to do the task. That's more important for the VAs compared to us, because I don't want to have to call them every single day and like do a download of like all the tasks that need to be done. I want to have them have a board that just says, here are the 12 things that need to get done in the next 3 days. And here's everything you need to know to get that done. Also, we want to have some evidence that the card was finished. So a screen capture, a link. And then finally, as Mike alluded to, we do what we call a Trello trim every Tuesday. We should call it the Tuesday Trello trim, right?
Yeah.
The terrific Tuesday Trello trim, where we just review every single task. And it usually takes us about an hour. So it's not, to be organized, sometimes you think like, I'm just like spending too much time trying to organize this and that and documenting everything. But once you get in the habit of it, it only takes us an hour to review every task, and it maybe takes another, 20 minutes, 30 minutes out of my week to kind of like document everything, to like write cards and update everything. So it's really not that bad, and it really keeps us on track.
Yeah, and talking about keeping on track, I think that one of the things that we learned using it recently is, when we started shifting to, it looks like we might be talking about this in a minute here, but when we started basically creating our 90-day goals, having a Trello board and being able to put labels on cards, I think really kind of took all the chaos of having hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, literally maybe 1,000 tasks, and kind of, breaking that down into what larger goal is it part of. And it really helped to define which cards were actually important versus separating it from the, this is a nice to have, but not really critical at the moment type tasks. So it's Trello, going back to the whole, organization and categorization piece. This Trello has that, basically built into, or the functionality built into it. And we weren't really using it until recently, but I feel like that's kind of changed a lot of things for us as well, and in helping us tackle some of the, more important tasks first.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us, like, what do you mean sprint goal planning? What does that mean?
Well, it's something that I've kind of dabbled in the corporate world. I know a lot of larger companies are starting to move towards kind of like an agile and sprint planning based planning, and that's something that we've adopted into our own Amazon business as well. But basically, setting a few large goals for a 90-day period, and really focusing on those things, and it kind of rolls up to looking at what your 1 year vision is, what your 3 year vision is, and going down from there. I think it's just a way to make sure that we're all as an organization driving in the same direction, as opposed to just checking tasks off of a list. It's really looking at the organization from a whole and saying, what do we need to do that can't necessarily be accomplished in the course of a week or a month, but would really help to progress our organization, and kind of rolling those up into these 90-day goals and being able to reflect on them to see, are we as an organization moving in the right direction? I think that's what it's all about. What do you think?
And it's something that we tried rolling out very recently, because I just learned about it recently. It's this system called EOS, which is Entrepreneurial's Operating System, EOS. It's all described in the book Traction, and also it's kind of highlighted in the sequel to the book Traction called Rocket Fuel. And Mike, you just read that book. What do you think about it?
I absolutely loved that book. Traction was good. Talking about how to organize your organization, basically organizing your organization and accountability. But the book that really jived with me, as you mentioned, Rocket Fuel, speaks mostly to how partners work as a visionary and an integrator. And I honestly kind of feel like when I was reading that book, I was like, man, someone wrote down our life story here, because
yeah,
they have that down to a science. Absolutely.
I think Traction is an awesome book. So there's a series, the EOS series is What the Heck is EOS, is kind of like it's the beginning book. It's very simple. I don't think it's even that necessary. It's the book so the idea is that like that's the book you give employees. Traction is the book you give managers, and Rocket Fuel is the book you give CEOs or COOs. And so What the Heck is EOS? That one's not that good. If anything, I would skip that one if I were you. But Traction's a really good book. It's a little dense, because it's like talking about, organizing teams and structuring meetings and stuff. I was like, oh man, it's not really like a beach page turner. You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't really take this down on like Sunday afternoon to hang out at the beach and read this book. But it's amazing for but it's amazing for learning how to organize your team and structure meetings and stuff like that. And so one of the big things that Mike was talking about is what they call sprint planning, or is that what they call it, sprint planning or vision planning?
I'm not sure. I mean, I've heard it called both, so I think both are technically. I mean, they could be used interchangeably. I'd expect.
Yeah, it's goal planning. It's basically just goal planning. And what they say is have a 10-year vision, a 3-year plan, or 10-year vision, a 3-year picture, a 1-year plan, a 90-day sprint, and then kind of like weekly meetings to make that happen. And so the 10-year vision, that's one thing I'm like, well, 10 years from now, I have no idea where I'm going to be 10 years from now. So we kind of skipped that part. We did do the 3-year picture and the 1-year plan. I think the 1-year plan is really where you start thinking, okay, this is very achievable. This is something that we can really do in a year. And then the 90-day sprint, you do that because 90 days is that point where you have your ambitions meet your time expectations, right? So when you think about it, like, can I get these 5 or 6 big goals? They suggest do 5 to 7. So 5, 6, 7 goals. Set these goals up so that you can accomplish these inside of 90 days. And often, if you set a 1-year goal or a 10-year goal, you might just say, I want to be a billionaire. Okay, cool. How do you get there? Well, make $100 million a year for 10 years and become a billionaire, right? Okay, well, how do I make $100 million a year? I don't know. That's kind of difficult. So to break down your goals a little bit smaller than that, right? A little more concrete than that. And so we started doing that, and we didn't really do any goal planning before. We just kind of like threw numbers out there. We're just like, I hope I make $1 million.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just kind of chaotic in terms of tasking, because it was just, just do the tasks, but we were never really striving for anything, I'd say, in particular.
Yeah. And so now how is it?
Now it's, now I know that we're on the same page in terms of where we see the business going. And I can see whether or not we achieved, or at least whether we're going in that right direction every 90 days when we review our sprints or our rocks and see if we accomplish them. I think it's been great.
Yeah. So let's go ahead. Let's see if we can just find a good goal to share. Why don't you look up a goal and we'll just read it and kind of explain like why this is a good goal to use as a sprint goal, as a rock, as they call it.
Yeah. So like, for example, one of our, current 90-day sprint goals is developing a corporate structure for team planning. And that's something we've been talking about for some time. We know that we've grown to a size that we really need more resources, more help from people, but we don't really know where we need that help at. And I think that this sprint kind of helps to define, or at least helps us to track tasking that's related to this. So, whether it's actually identifying the roles that are needed or performing an analysis to help define those needs, all that stuff, that all basically falls under this bucket.
Yeah. And so our rock, they call it a rock. I should probably describe why they call it a rock. So they kind of have a silly example of taking a large glass, and the large glass represents your time for the day, the week, the year, whatever, right? And that glass you have to fill with tasks, and certain tasks are different sizes of rocks and sand and pebbles and stuff like that. And so one thing that we can find is that sometimes our day gets completely filled with just doing these tiny little minutia things like answering emails, reading mail, maybe updating little silly things like maybe updating a picture or organizing your office or something that's very kind of like menial task, very doesn't really push the company forward. A lot of times they have to get done. You do have to answer emails at some point, right? So you are working and you're not just being lazy, but like, what are you actually doing? Is it that useful? I don't know. Those kind of tasks are represented with sand, right? The next tasks are little tasks like maybe you have to update your books. Maybe you have to send in a purchase order. Maybe you have to, these are like kind of like bigger tasks that are kind of a lot more important. They're still not like huge things that make your business drive forward. Those are like pebbles. And you have big tasks that are something that you really need to get done, something that's going to take several months to do, and it might take a few people to work together to get these things done. And these are things that you really have to do to get your business moving forward and going towards that plan and that picture and that vision. And these we call rocks. So what you have to do to get the rocks done, you cannot fill your jar, your glass of time with sand, because if you fill it first with sand, there'll be no room for pebbles, and maybe you can get a few pebbles in there, but you can't get any rocks in there. And if you also fill your day with pebbles, you might not have enough space to get any rocks in there. So what you do is you take your rocks and you fill them first. Fill your glass of time first with rocks, and then dribble in the pebbles, and then you pour in the sand. The sand's what fills the cracks and stuff. So let email fill the crack. Don't let your entire day go to emails, right? So that's a rock. Now here's an example of like one of our rocks, like Mike suggested, or Mike alluded to, the developing corporate structure. Do you want to read through and kind of give an overview of like why this is a good rock?
I think it's a good rock because this is, as you mentioned, it's not something that's going to get done overnight. This is going to take, at least a few months between planning and executing it. There's a lot involved with this in terms of defining your organization. We need to actually discuss, what does our organization look like? We need to build an org chart. As I mentioned earlier, defining the roles for people in those in that org chart, and then just building cohesion in an integrated team. That's definitely a big undertaking. So the whole process of kind of formalizing and defining all these aspects of developing a corporate structure, I think that this is one of the big things that we need right now, that we know we're going to need a little bit of time to work through, and hopefully in the next 90 days, we'll have made some good headway towards it. And the other thing that I like about these rocks is that it's obviously, if you could get 100% of them done, that'd be great. But I think according to either Traction, basically if you're hitting 80% of it, you're stellar, you're a rock star. So with our previous sprint planning, or our last 90 days, there were a couple, we were quite ambitious. I think we had 7 rocks on that one, and we started recognizing towards the end of the 90 days that, wow, some of these might carry over to the next 90 days, and you know what, that's perfectly okay. But at least having it kind of recorded and on our Trello board keeps us accountable for the rock and keeps it visible. It's doesn't kind of just fade away just because we haven't really completed the rock. It's just it moves on to the next one, and then you basically just incorporate it into your next 90 days of planning.
And one thing I love about these rocks is that there's a lot of things that are not included in these rocks. That's probably the most important thing. It's not what you include, it's what you exclude is most important. For example, I really want to get on Walmart.com, and I've gone through a few trainings on how to do Walmart, and we should do a whole episode on Walmart maybe later, but we just haven't had it as a priority. We had 5 to 7 things that we do, and last quarter it didn't make the top 5. And this quarter, it didn't make the top 5 either, the top 7 either. And so maybe we might put it as a rock for next quarter, but we know right now that we are not to pursue anything on Walmart. We just need to concentrate on our 5 or 6 goals that we have this quarter. And that's basically mostly getting through Christmas is kind of like the most important thing for this quarter. And we really should not be focusing on like opening up new markets right now. We should just be focusing on Christmas and setting up our team and getting through Christmas really successfully. And it just gives so much clarity to have those kind of goals set up like that.
Right.
All right, Mike, tell us, what do you think we need to improve right now?
What do we need to improve? Well, we should probably take a look at our rocks and see how we're doing against those, because Q4 has been absolutely crazy as it always is, and I think maybe we're getting a little distracted from our rocks because there's so much chaotic Q4 stuff that's going on. But we're here preaching about using rocks as our guiding direction for what we need to be accomplishing, and I think maybe we could spend a little more time making sure that we're on target for meeting these rocks.
It's a good point. We should probably get on that. Maybe on Monday we'll do a rock review and like see where we are, because our sprint is supposed to end in basically 3 weeks, and so we still have. That's a nice thing. We still have some time. Still have plenty of time to get them done, but like we got to get them done too. That's awesome. But in general, what do you think, like organizing, building teams, like how we organize our files, our communication? Do you think there's anything that we are lacking on that we need to really improve?
No, nothing at all. I think we're perfect at it.
Perfect. All right. Awesome. Well, learn from us. We're perfect.
No, I think probably the one thing that I think, or one of the things that I think that we could improve on is how we use our cloud storage, our Dropbox storage. I know right now, basically everyone on our team just dumps files into there. Everyone kind of has their own methodology for how they organize files. And I know we've made some efforts towards organizing, or finding a way to create some kind of organizational structure to those. But I don't know. I think that's kind of where we struggle. Is there's just so much stuff that goes into it without enough thought to where it should be going. I think that's somewhere where we can improve. I just don't. I'm not sure how we could do it exactly. So,
have you read my Wiki article on how to organize files?
I did when you first wrote it, and I'll be honest, I don't remember at all what it even says. So that I'm definitely part of the problem here.
I'm going to drop that link. While you were talking, I found it in my wiki, and I'm going to drop that link to you right now on Slack.
Okay.
On Slack.
All righty.
About Dropbox. There you go. Tying it all together.
All right.
So yeah, I agree. There's always room for improvement, and there's a point where we, it's like you can be perfect if you do this, this, and this, but you'll have no time to do anything else if you are constantly striving to get everything super organized. But I agree, like this stuff's kind of a big task. It's hard to do it. Also, when you're the boss, I guess no one cares if you do it right or do it wrong, or maybe your P&L tells you whether you're doing it right or wrong. But it's hard when no one's enforcing the rules. Like you have to be the one who's disciplined and has to enforce the rules. Especially, that's one thing that was kind of nice having the employees come on, because I'm like, oh wait, there are these ideas I had about how we should have rules, but now we have to actually do it, because it doesn't make any sense when you just like send them a Dropbox file full of 1,200 photos, but some of them are in there, some of them aren't, some are duplicated, some are not, and so to have that structure, to have a team is really nice.
Yeah, agree. That definitely forces some discipline there, because you can't exactly just send them hey, here's a wiki on how everything's organized, and then not really have it organized in that way, because they're going to go in there and be like, what the heck? No, nothing is where it says it's supposed to be. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking over the wiki that you just sent me over now, and I'll definitely need to keep this in mind when I'm moving files into there.
So one thing I always kind of wonder, like when you're learning about these businessy things, where's the best place to learn about these things? I mean, I know I go out and learn a lot of this stuff and kind of bring it to you, but like, what do you think? Is there a good place to find this stuff besides just having to do it for several years and learning the hard way?
I'm not sure. I feel like a lot of good information comes from networking with people. I mean, I know that I haven't been to all that many conferences for running an e-commerce business, but for example, the last one that we went to, I mean, just talking to people and sharing the types of problems you've had while you're sitting around a dinner table, like chances are someone else at that dinner table had the same exact problem at some point in their business life cycle, and already has the problem solved. And so there was a lot of sharing of experiences and processes, and how different people do different things, and just basically taking all that as input and seeing, all right, what actually makes sense from here? What can I actually utilize from this? And then obviously, you want to contribute your share of it as well. And I know that, we did that in the last conference we went to. There were plenty of people that were asking about, how we do our planning and things like that. And I shared with them exactly how we do all of our, Trello tasks and our Trello reviews and things like that. So I feel like other people that are in a similar, e-commerce type area of business are probably the most valuable resources.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love conferences, and I always learn so much from them. And it's kind of interesting too. You go to a conference, you never really know what kind of stuff you're going to pick up, but they always call it golden nuggets, right? You hear that one thing that one person talks about, like, oh, I know one thing that got you really excited is someone told us about healthcare. Even though healthcare is kind of boring, it's really complicated and scary for entrepreneurs. So you want to tell us about that story?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I guess one of my biggest hesitations for leaving, a corporate type role that has benefits is really health insurance, and sadly that kind of constrains a lot of entrepreneurs, from what I understand. And through talking to people at the conferences, I learned about health sharing or health cost sharing. Didn't even realize it was a thing. It's not. They don't call it health insurance, but it's a way of providing health coverage. And it's something that I think you'd mentioned before, Andrew. You'd mentioned it to me before, and it was kind of always on my list of things to look into. But then I suddenly was just immersed with tons of people that were already actively using it and were very happy with their experiences with it, and just having their accounts of their personal experiences, and just hearing their positive experiences. It made it that much more, or it made me that much more confident that that is a very real solution to not, or I guess for entrepreneurs to basically not be paying an arm and a leg for basically providing their own health coverage.
So you didn't believe me. You had to hear from a stranger.
No, it's not that I didn't believe you. It's just, hearing about it versus hearing someone that's actually living it, I feel like was really what the difference was, more than anything. There was never any point that I didn't believe what you were saying. It's just it was just kind of always put to the wayside, and then just as I said, being immersed with people that were all like, yeah, like it was, to them it was not a big deal. It was just part of what they do. I think that that was really cool. Yeah, and then also in the same token, when we were at that last conference, just meeting someone, we were kind of struggling with a lot of dealing with logistics of storage and trickling in inventory and things like that. And you and I were at lunch and just casually talking about it, and the guy next to us mentioned that he was working with an excellent 3PL, a third party logistics company, and recommended them. And what do you know? Like we literally went back home the next week and looked them up, and now we're registered with them, and they're holding a ton of our inventory. And it's just that I feel like that's something that we probably wouldn't have stumbled into so readily without having met someone that says, yes, I'm using this part or this third party company or third party logistics company, and they've been nothing but awesome. And yeah, I feel like going back to your original question about learning where or how to do these things, I still go back to what I was saying about people being the best resource, I think.
Yeah, and that 3PL we're using is Worldcraft Logistics, and it was a little bit of a pain getting it set up, but now that we're going along, they're pretty good. I mean, they're as far as once you kind of figure out their system, we've been pretty happy with them. And their storage costs are much cheaper than Amazon, especially during Q4. I think they're pretty comparable for the rest of the year, but Q4 it's dramatically cheaper.
Yeah, and I have to think some of that pain was probably because we were onboarding during the busiest part of Q4. I mean, I'm sure that they had their hands full, and the fact that we were still able to get into their system and get our inventory over to them last minute, mind you. I mean, I think that all said and done, that things worked out pretty nicely.
Yeah, I definitely give them a shout out. So Worldcraft Logistics, and they onboard, like Mike said, they onboarded us early middle of November. And also I called them and I was like, hey, can you guys receive 2 shipping containers in like 4 days from now? And they're like, yeah, we could probably do that. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's do it.
Yep.
Awesome. So Mike, tell us, one thing I like asking everybody is your big why. I want to know, why do you do the things that you do?
Well, that's funny that you ask, because I remember asking you initially way early on why, and your response at the time, I was like, oh, that's cool. But I didn't really think anything of it, or not that I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think much of it, I should say. And your response really was time and location independence. And at the time, I was like, yeah, it's nice to have flexibility in your time and your location. It took me a little while to really understand how big of a deal that is, and I think the the point in my life at which time and location independence became such a influential factor was when I had kids. So I had my first daughter in 2017 and I had my second one earlier this year in March in 2019. And, between working my corporate job and also doing this on the side, I found myself with neither of those, no time and no location independence whatsoever. My big why though, for doing this, I've come to realize, is really, I'm after the same thing. I want that time and location independence. And thus far, being able to work on this business or being part of this business has really afforded me a lot of time and location independence, and ultimately, being able to spend a lot more time with my family and being around, for that much more time while my kids are growing up, which I couldn't trade that for anything. So that's my big why.
I love that. Yeah, I know our big why was time, location, independence, so that we could do our year traveling. But now that we're done, I think I've told the podcast this, but my wife is pregnant. She's already in the second half now of her pregnancy, which is pretty exciting. And so I also am excited about having that time, location, independence with family and with particularly my kids. My kid, I should say, it's not twins, it's a kid. So, so I wish. I was super excited. I was like crossing my fingers. I was like, twins.
Really?
My wife was like, no, awesome. 111. I was like, twins.
That's too funny.
Mike, tell us what's a book or a podcast or a website that you like?
Well, obviously this podcast for sure.
Of course.
But besides that, let's see. I admittedly spend way too much time Redditing. Books, I gotta say, Rocket Fuel is one of the. Well, first of all, I don't read many books, and I'm 100% open to admitting that. But you, Andrew, have gotten me reading some of these books, and I think Rocket Fuel is by far one of the best books that I've read in a really long time, because I just feel like it aligns so well with you and I as business partners, and it really helped me to understand the way that, not only the way that I function without realizing it, but the way that you function as well, and kind of setting expectations for basically both those roles that we mentioned earlier, the visionary and integrator roles. So I highly recommend that book. But yeah, podcast. I think the last podcast I listened to was the one that you recommended to me when we first started out, which was Scott Voelker's Amazing Seller. Haven't really kept up with it recently, but I know that, early on in starting the business, it was incredibly encouraging. Just kind of listening to someone that was living and breathing Amazon selling, and all the trials and tribulations that come with it and how they dealt with it. There were a lot of things that I learned from that podcast where I ended up running into that same issue and thinking to myself, hey, I remember where they talked about this. And in some cases, I knew exactly what to do. And in the other cases, I was able to go find the podcast where they talked about it and just re-listen to it and, just have that problem basically solved already. So those would be my recommendations.
Yeah, and I absolutely loved The Amazing Seller. It's Scott Voelker's podcast. And we went to his conference actually in Dallas, the Brand Builder Accelerator, or Brand Accelerator, right? Loved it. And I was super happy to meet Scott in person. His podcast was amazing 4 years ago. It's still amazing today, but took a little bit of a different turn. He's more about traditional marketing, like email marketing and audience engagement, which is really important. But it's a little bit less about Amazon. He's upfront about that. Is he says he wants to be like a brand building podcast, not a Amazon, how to sell stuff on Amazon podcast, which makes sense. But for me, I'm kind of all about Amazon and just selling stuff on Amazon. But yeah, it's a good podcast still. Mike, what is one actionable thing that Amazon sellers can do today?
I think if you're not using tools for organization, definitely look into it. I mean, it's there's no sense in reinventing the wheel in terms of, how you organize your tasks or communicate with your team. I mean, take advantage of tools like Slack and Trello, the Google Suite. I mean, just basically everything that we talked about in this podcast, because it will just make your business that much more of a well-oiled machine, as opposed to, just mayhem and miscommunications and things like that. So that would be my recommendation, is if you're not using organization tools today, think about how you can implement them and give them a try. I mean, I think that they'll change the way that you do business for sure.
Great. That's fantastic. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you being here for this interview. And let's push forward through Q4 and stay organized.
Right on. Thanks again for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed this content. I always try to bring as much as I can and share as much with you guys as much as possible. And I always try to do that for free. So for you, everything's free. Take it all, use it, please grow this world, grow your business, get everything bigger and better. The only thing that we ask from you is that you possibly leave us a review on iTunes. It really helps people find us. I am going to read one of my favorite reviews here. We have a VPug. That's the person's name, VPug, I guess. Left a review. Amazon Gold right here. I can't think of a better way to learn in the ins and outs of Amazon than through a podcast like this. I am just learning about the ways of Amazon, and if being a seller is as viable option for me, wow, is this show informative. Andrew's great, his fantastic guest, tremendous insights, and he really gets to the point on topics. I love hearing the real life stories from Andrew's guests. Yes, thank you, VPug. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're finding value. If you found value as well, please go to iTunes and leave us a review.